on energy systems and how this affects conditioning for your sport. So everybody's sport's a little bit different, but overall you can kind of pick up a lot of similarities between different sports and how you can train similarly for them. So here are three systems that we like to think of in terms of training, conditioning, and energy systems when you're training for your sport. So there's your alactic. This is max power. So you think of full speed, as hard as you can go. At most, you're going to do that for 10 to 12 seconds before that system starts to shut down and shift, right? And then it's going to go into your lactic, which is the one that burns the most. This is when you think of if anybody's ran a 400 or 800 meter run around a track, which is a quarter mile, half a mile, those are going to burn the most, right? Compared to aerobic, that's where you use oxygen to be able to replenish ATP. That's going to be the one where this one can go for 60 seconds up to like 90 seconds to 2 minutes more, and then everything that and beyond is aerobic, right? And so what I want you to think of is you can't go out, let's say you're going for a jog, your alactic doesn't kick in for a jog if you're going to go for 30 minutes for the first 10 to 12 seconds because you're not producing enough power. You're just going at, let's say 30% of your speed or 50% of your speed, whatever it would be. So you need to be able to produce a high level force. Now, if you went full speed sprint, you're only going to be able to do that to about this. And then if, let's say, you keep trying to continue that power output, you're going to hit this lactic system, which is what you think of like a 400 meter run. If you ran around a track one time as hard as you can, it's going to burn a lot. Then let's say you want to do that same pace for as long as you can. At one point, your brain's going to shut you down going full speed. And that's what you think of with aerobic, where you can continue to do that pace for much longer, right? And so how that makes sense here, if you look at world record speeds, right? So here's a 100-meter dash. The Usain Bolt and all those really, really fast guys, they're hitting a max speed of around 27 miles an hour, and their average speed for the whole race is 23 miles an hour. And then you get to the world record holder for a 400-meter dash. They're hitting 20.71 miles per hour is their average speed, and then you'll see the miles down to 16, and the world record marathon is down to a little over 12 and a half, right? So that's a pretty big drop if you see per race. So from a 10-second race to a 43-second race, it's a reduction about 11%. And then you see the 400-meter record holder to a mile, it's a reduction about 22%. And then 1 mile to 26 miles, a reduction of 21%. And then if you look at, the fastest race, which is a 100-meter dash, to typically the slowest race, which is a marathon, there's an average speed drop of about 54%, right? So here's just kind of another curve, the first, 9.6 seconds for the 100-meter dash all the way down to the marathon and the change in speed, how that drops. And so what this matters with is when you guys are doing this training. So I gave you some options. So you'll see typically in the weight room, we do a lot of this alactic stuff. We want to be able to train strength, power, speed, all of that, because it's really hard to develop and it takes a long time. This lactic option is the one that burns the most. This is the one where you feel like you did the most at the end. You're absolutely spent. You're toast. If you do that for a long time, your body wants to just like fall over and collapse, right? This feels like it's the most conditioning when sometimes it's actually the wrong system we want to hit. And then the aerobic option, so cardiac output, where you go for long, slow distance jogs, runs, bikes, rowing, tempo runs is another variation I put on here. Even going for a really like fast-paced walk is going to get you into aerobic. It's where you can have your heart rate in this 120 to 150 range, where you can still have a conversation and go. Now, if you're cross-country runner or distance runner, you're going to push what's called your aerobic capacity, which is a whole nother thing here. But we're talking mostly for most of our athletes here, it's tennis, lacrosse, volleyball, baseball. All these are really what's called an alactic aerobic sport, where you use these two systems the most. You rarely kind of get into this lactic area, and you actually want to stay out of that as much as you can. So when we're training, what I want you to think of is when we're lifting and doing all that, we're hitting this alactic part a lot, right? We're going to do an exercise, we're going to rest from that exercise for about 2-3 minutes, and we're going to hit it again. Lactic is something we kind of stay out of because we do very rarely, because it builds up a lot of, people call it lactic acid, but there's some other science behind there. And then there's the aerobic, which is another area that you want to be able to attack because it helps with recovery, right? So what I want you guys to think of if you're doing these conditioning options this week is you're going to do a lot of this stuff with you do the lifts and the sprinting. You can even add another 30-yard sprint. And then I'd add something sort of like this, the cardiac output, tempo runs, things like that. And if one of the days you want to try one of these once or twice, that's great. These aren't bad at all. I just wouldn't consistently do them. So just kind of give you a rundown of that. If found this interesting, let me know, and we can always dig into the details more.